Hey, this is Hans from Dakota Angler and Outfitter in Rapid City, South Dakota. We're going to do a short video on how to properly apply dubbing to thread. This is probably one of the most difficult tasks for beginning fly tyers to learn to do correctly. And I see a lot of people that have been tying for a long time that have never quite learned how to apply dubbing correctly. And so their flies always end up looking a little rough just because they haven't applied the dubbing correctly. Now there's lots of different types of dubbing: synthetic, natural fiber, various applications for dubbing, dry flies, nymphs. This video will look just closely at the essential technique for applying dubbing, and we might look in subsequent videos on different styles of dubbing. So we've got our thread hanging off of our hook. I've got some Spirit River fine and dry dubbing in my hands. And probably the biggest mistake that people make when dubbing a fly is, instead of grabbing a small amount, they grab enough to tie 18 flies and are trying to use all of this dubbing on one fly. Now that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but people grab way too much dubbing. Lesson one is you can always add more dubbing as you go along. So start out with a very small amount. So what I've done here is I've grabbed a small clump of dubbing, and what I'll often do, because most of the flies we tie end up having some sort of taper to them, I will take the ball of dubbing and just tease out a small amount. And what you'll find is if you tease it out like that, generally the way it stretches out, you'll have fewer fibers here at the top of this area that's been teased out, and it just gradually gets thicker as you go back towards the ball of dubbing. And you can just keep working dubbing out, and that'll stay true. You'll have less fibers, and you'll gradually increase the number of fibers that you have. This is building a taper into your noodle of dubbing before you even get started applying it to thread. That helps you achieve a nice tapered body as you work forward. So then when I actually want to start applying the dubbing to the thread, I'm going to lay the dubbing behind the thread. I'll zoom in just a little bit here. So I'll lay the dubbing behind the thread, and then everything when you're dubbing comes from pushing your thumb across the surface of your forefinger and pulling your forefinger back simultaneously. It's just one direction. You see people doing this back and forth like this. That doesn't work. You just go one direction. Push your thumb across your forefinger with a fair amount of tension. And what I'll do is I'll bring my forefinger behind the thread, push the dubbing against the thread so that the dubbing starts to actually form around the thread. Before you even put any pressure on, you're forcing the fibers of dubbing to surround the thread. And then I'll start with a light twist, and then I'll gradually increase the tension as I go. What you should see is you're able to form a nice tapered length of dubbing. What you shouldn't see, and what a lot of people get, is they don't get the thread or the dubbing securely compressed around the thread. They get something where they've almost rubbed it too much beforehand, and they get these little things that hang off like this, where the thread or the dubbing isn't actually wrapped around the thread. You need to curb that by doing exactly what I started out doing. Take the clump of dubbing, tease it out so that it gets a natural taper to the clump of dubbing. Bring that dubbing up behind the thread. Start working it around the thread with some light twists, and then apply a fair amount of tension. And then when you're ready to apply that to your hook, I take the length of my finger, slide the dubbing up the thread, or to the hook, bring up any extra thread that I might have, and then work forward, dubbing the body. You can make a nice fine body, taper it as you go forward. I got to the end of my nice clump of dubbing and got to where I had messed it up previously. But then when you get to the end of your clump, you can use the rest of that dubbing up, and there you have a nice taper from back to front. So that's the basic premise of applying dubbing. Start with a little. If you needed to continue dubbing this and you had run out of dubbing at this point, that's no big deal. You can always go back and just grab a little extra dubbing, apply more in the same manner as you started before, and just pick up where you left off. Don't think you have to add all of the dubbing at once, because you can just pick up where you left off, working back to make that taper and continue that taper forward. So if you start with a small enough amount, make sure that you get it securely bound to your thread by pushing behind and then drawing your thumb and forefinger over the dubbing so that it gets completely around the thread. There aren't any hanging loops of dubbing. You'll be in good shape. So I'm Hans from Dakota Angler and Outfitter. We just finished discussing how to properly apply dubbing to thread. Check these and other videos out at flyfishsd.com, and you can also purchase materials to tie the flies in our videos at flyfishsd.com. Thanks for watching.